Welcome to On the X. My guest today is Dr. Marc Brackett, a psychologist, professor at Yale University, and the founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. A leading expert on emotional intelligence, his research focuses on how emotions shape learning, decision-making, relationships, and performance. He's the creator of the Ruler approach, an evidence-based framework used in thousands of schools and organizations to help people better understand and manage their emotions. Dr. Brackett is also the author of the best-selling book, Permission to Feel, and the follow-up, Dealing with Feeling, which explore how emotional skills can improve well-being and success in everyday life. So here we go with Dr. Marc Brackett on the X.
You know, I had parents who loved me, good people, but my mom had a lot of anxiety, and she would say things like, I can't handle what's going on. And my father was like, the guy from the Bronx, he's like, son, you gotta toughen up. And so I think that having a father who was sort of like, toughen up, kiddo, you're not gonna make it unless you get thicker skin, and a mom who's like having nervous breakdowns every day, that combo isn't sort of like a message for a kid to say, like, look at me, like bad things are happening and I'm scared. You just suppress it. You deny it. And I was lucky that I had my Uncle Marvin, who was my mother's brother, who happened to be running a whole curriculum to teach kids about feelings, come into my life when I was around 10 and 11. And we were just sitting in the backyard, and he would interview me about these words he was using in his curriculum. Like, tell me a time when you felt left out or alienated. Tell me a time when you felt elated. Tell me a time when you felt despair. We have all these like really rich conversations, but we're getting to know each other. And I think just those conversations, one day I just decided, like, "Ugh, I think this is the guy who I can like confide in to share what's going on." And I think importantly, he didn't say toughen up or I'm going to have a breakdown. He said, we're going to get through it. And honestly, it transformed my life.
I think a lot of people have some degree of that. Maybe they don't have abuse in their childhood. Like I didn't have any kind of abuse or anything like
Sure.
that. I had great parents who were very supportive. But and they didn't even say like, boys don't cry or anything like that. However, I think I still sort of took that attitude on board. That sort of like, just toughen up, suck it up. It's a very
Yeah.
male, traditional kind of
Yeah.
male
This
attitude.
is the world we live in.
And so the thing that I want to get to with that is, why is it that we're generally speaking so bad at this, at sort of dealing with emotions properly, especially growing up? It just seems like a cultural thing in the West, certainly,
Yeah.
and I can't speak for other parts of the world. But what is it about our culture, and why have we gotten to this point where it seems like we're just terrible at this?
Yeah. Well, this is I have a book that I just released called Dealing with Feeling,
Yes.
which is all about this topic. And, in my research with thousands of people across the world, we find that we just don't value emotions in our society, in particular here in the United States. We think that emotions should be suppressed, denied, leave your emotions at the door. And I think it's because we see when we think about feelings, we don't think about like um, inspiration and you know joy and contentment as much as we think, oh, you're having feelings. That means you're hysterical. You're emotional. It means you're out of control, and that's a very kind of historical way of thinking about it. And so, like, we don't want you to be hysterical. We don't want you to be out of control. So let's suppress it. It's easier to just suppress it. And obviously, historically, even in psychology, if you go back to Stoicism, rule your feelings or they'll rule you, you know? And it's like now we're like, no, 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 no. Actually, the goal is to use our emotions wisely to achieve the best things in life.
Yeah.
When you think about creativity, it's all emotion.
Mm.
Yeah, it's like, and so it's a different mindset. It's emotions are adaptive. They ensure your survival. Fear is not a bad thing. It's saying, shit, there's danger. I gotta get out of here. You know, anger is not a bad emotion. It's saying there's an injustice that needs to be fought. And so I think that's one of the big reasons. The second is that because um, we haven't valued it as a society, we haven't figured out a way to teach it. And so we value math, we value English language arts in America. We value science, and we have a curricula. You have 2 + 2 = 4, and then you
Yeah.
get division, then you get, calculus, etc. Well, how do we make meaning and sense out of our emotional life, and then teach kids strategies that are appropriate for regulating emotions in kindergarten versus 3rd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade, 12th grade? That's what I work on, because I do think, well, I don't even think I know that, people with more developed emotion skills are just happier, healthier, more effective in life.
Yeah.
So it's like historically, we've kind of categorized it as out of control when your emotions are out of control, and just to genderize it a little bit, they're more feminine than masculine. So women get emotional, although
Right.
I've seen some men I've seen some pretty emotional guys. They just behave in a different way.
Yeah. It is, you mentioned stoicism in there, and that stoicism has kind of like got this big resurgence and kind of stoicism made a comeback, kind of, I think largely thanks to Ryan Holiday and a lot of the work that he's done.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, I think sometimes that's misinterpreted, but certainly that idea of kind of intellect over emotions is so ingrained in things, even the way we put such value on IQ, and everyone kind of knows what that is. Even if they can't articulate, if you ask someone, what is IQ, they still get the concept of that. But we rarely talk about EQ, about emotional intelligence, like the equivalent of that on the emotional side, to the point where I want to say the first time I even heard someone mention the term emotional intelligence was probably 5-10 years ago for me. Certainly as an adult, I never heard that term growing up, where I heard IQ tests. I mean, you can take a test to give you a number that tells you that. And I remember the first time somebody said it to me, I don't remember who it was, but I just remember my feeling, I guess, or my thought, which was, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what that means. Do you have a definition for that, for emotional intelligence? And then as part of that too, how do you define emotions? I've read different definitions of this in different books. I mentioned Ethan Kross, the work of Lisa Feldman Barrett and how emotions are made. It was fascinating for me. So how do you define those terms specifically? Because I think we need to define things if we're going to work with them properly, right?
100%. Well, by the way, since I'm the founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, I better have a definition.
Yeah, good point. Yes, you should.
So I think, firstly, if you want to go at the highest level, the broadest level, emotional intelligence is a set of skills that helps us to use our emotions wisely. So that's a broader, how we reason with our emotions to achieve goals. So it's the juxtaposition of emotion and cognition that are coming together. That's why I was thinking the other day about this. I lost my mother when I was young, and my father was dating a woman who we just didn't really think she was the right fit for my dad. And, then she wanted my father to sell him. My father had a quadruple bypass, 3 strokes.
Oh,
He was not in
geez.
the best health. And so she was like, I don't want to live with where your mother lived and your father. I want to buy a new country house, like a Victorian house. I'm like, my father's 70 years old. What is he doing in this Victorian house? Can't even get up the freaking stairs. And then she's like, Mark, every decision I make in my life is with my heart, and my heart is telling me this is the best thing for your father and me. And I'm thinking to myself, that is the opposite of emotional intelligence, right? It's not all feeling. And that's a misconception of emotional intelligence. The feelings rule. No, it's called emotional intelligence. So then we get to be wise, get to utilize our emotions wisely for achieving a goal. And so that means it needs skills. And so we need to recognize our own and others' emotions. So like we're having a conversation right now and I'm looking at your face and your body posture. I'm listening to your vocal tone. I'm thinking like, is Chris interested or is he bored? Is he motivated? But we do that automatically.
Yeah.
And we should do it because it matters.
Sure.
Because, if I always think sometimes when I'm in meetings with people when I'm not like the most motivated or inspired, like, don't they just pick it up on my face? like switch it around a little bit. Let's go. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's make this little,
Yeah.
So that's the
It is a
that-
good point, just because, I do this podcast and you're right. I hadn't really thought about this, but you're even, sort of explicitly, not just implicitly, I'm thinking about like, is this person engaged? Are they interested in this? Are they just thinking about the next thing? Like, did they just get a note from their assistant that's like, dial into this thing,
exactly.
right? So it's a good point. You're right. I have those thoughts and feelings as I'm having these conversations, for sure.
So that's the first R of my model, which is called ruler. So recognizing emotions, that's self-awareness and social awareness. The U is understanding of emotion. So that's the understanding that emotions have different causes and consequences, and they influence our thinking in certain ways. So notice, have you ever been on vacation?
Sure.
Like on the beach, like you got your pina colada, you're like, you're feeling great. Your brain is not thinking like, I'm in trouble, like run for your life, because you're feeling content. And so you've appraised the environment as one that is safe and relaxing. You're feeling contentment. Contentment means you can be at ease. But when someone kicks a sand in your face, all of a sudden, right, what happens? Boom. You get laser focused. You're like, what the hell's going on here? Is this a threat? That's another emotion that has been activated because of the shift in your environment. And that's a signal to approach or avoid or fight or flight. And so we have to understand emotions in terms of their causes and their consequences. To make it even more concrete, when we feel angry, it's because of a perceived injustice. When we feel disappointment, it's because of an unmet expectation. Do you see those differences?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you have kids or don't have kids, doesn't matter. Imagine I'm a kid, I coming home from school and I come in, Daddy, I hate school. How am I feeling?
How am I feeling when my kid does that?
How am I feeling? No, how am I feeling? How you see me come
Angry.
home from school, or how do you know?
It's a good question. I suppose it's something about the body language, what the tone of their voice, and the context, obviously, that they're talking about.
Yeah, so you're trying to make inferences based on cues or clues in my behavior, my facial expression, what I'm saying. But going back to Lisa Feldman Barrett's work on emotions, what you're doing is you're making a hypothesis, you're making a guess. You don't really know how I'm feeling unless I tell you, Daddy, I thought I was going to get an A on the test. I studied my ass off and I got a C, and that's why I hate school. Oh, now I get it, son. You're disappointed. You had an expectation that wasn't met. Or, the teacher told me that I needed to know these three things, but they put two other things on the test that they didn't tell me I needed to know. Those are the only two I got wrong. I'm pissed because that's an injustice. That's not fair. You lied to me, the teacher. But I may show up with the same behavior. Going back to the whole historical piece on emotions, I've been taught as a boy, I'm not going to be like, Daddy, I feel really sad. I'm like, like a little wimpy, like the teacher didn't tell me the truth. I'm going to be like, F her, And so I'm going to have aggression because that's what I've been told is the socially appropriate thing for boys to do. You're going to then make an attempt, if you're really paying attention, to figure out what's going on with my son. You might think I'm angry, when I'm feeling disappointment, you're going to respond to me in a different way if you know what I'm really feeling. Does that make
It
sense?
does, yeah. And there's and obviously your book is, I've got it right here, Dealing with Feeling, is about regulation and how what we then do with emotions.
Yes.
And specifically co-regulation, which I think is really interesting and not something that I've dealt with all that much or talked to people about all that much. But just as we kind of get into that, some clarifying points with kind of what you're saying here, what you're talking about, because this is the part that I always find kind of fascinating about emotions in general, is how much of it is a couple things. How much of it is physiological, where it's like you could, the energetic piece of it, whatever you want to call that, the biological piece of it is the emotion, and how much is the context, exactly what you're talking about, right? So
let's pause there for a minute. So the biological piece is not the emotion only, because emotions are concepts in our heads.
Yep.
So the physiology is part of the emotion, but importantly, the same physiology can be associated with very different emotions.
Right, exactly. Yes. Yep. Okay. That's what I was kind of getting at, because there is I bring that up just because I think for a lot of people, again, what we've been taught or heard anyway is sort of like emotions are just sort of vestiges of our evolutionary past. And it's like, it's all the same across the board, where, again, reading Lisa Feldman Barrett's book about how emotions are made, like the constructed experience, the kind of context of it, telling you, helping you to discern what emotion you are feeling, is kind of an interesting thing, especially when I sort of like dig into that and break it down. I think the other interesting piece of it is, given that it's...
But I want to, just one thing. I think,
go ahead.
I don't want to discount, because, every theorist, is pushing an agenda, right? A perspective.
Sure.
And so, everybody's not right.
Yeah, correct.
And everybody's not wrong either, And so, isn't, like, for example, in the facial expression literature,
yes,
going back to the R for a minute,
facial expression stuff, right? Yep.
There's like, all right, so maybe Paul Ekman overdid it in his research, on happy, sad, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, David Matsumoto has shown, in his research, that he studied judo players who were congenitally, born congenitally blind. And when they win, they go like this. And they've never seen a facial expression. So there are some aspects of this that are biological. The interpretation of that is something we have to talk about. Does it always mean triumph? No. It could mean something else. It could mean victory. It could mean, I'm going after you to go kill you. We're like on a rampage here. So I just want to make a point about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. And I agree with you on that. I mean, when I read that the facial expression stuff, I was like, I don't know if I am a hard liner on that. To your point, it's like a baby smiles and it's like, I'm pretty sure it's happy now. Can it contextualize happiness? No, but like whatever that is.
It's pleasure. It's a form of pleasure.
Right. The mission doesn't end when a warrior returns home. Injuries, trauma, and challenging transitions often follow, well after the uniform comes off. Donor funding helps provide medical care, mental health support, and long-term recovery when it's needed most. You're not just a donor, you are that warrior. Learn how you can get involved at NavySealFoundation.org.
Hi, everybody. This episode is brought to you by our partners at GHOSTBED. And today I'm actually sitting down with its founder, Mark Warner, to talk about the story behind their brand and why they're all in on all of us getting better sleep.
I've had 3 neck surgeries over the past 27 years. And so I couldn't find a pillow or mattress that worked for me. And so I ended up having to invent my own. I took great care in it so it would take care of my problems. And then I also sleep warm, so I invented a lot of cooling technologies and got a number of patents on that kind of technology. So that was the origin of the purpose. But I wanted to start it with my wife and then my kids as a family business. So my grandfather, after World War I, he started the Werner Company, which ultimately became Werner Ladder. And then my dad invented the aluminum ladder, the machines to make it, and then he invented the fiberglass ladder and fiberglass and the machines to make that. So I was reared in that environment of quality, engineering, inventing, all that kind of stuff. And I grew up in that. So when I was starting GHOSTBED and making my own memory foam pillows and mattress, that was my kind of history, and allowed me to kind of really make a very quality product. And that's really how we got started. And we're all about high quality at an affordable price. So for all of our IRONCLAD viewers, we have a special offer. So you go to ghostbed.com/IRONCLAD, and we're giving an extra 15% off, which is a really big discount on already low prices. To come to GHOSTBED, take advantage of that special pricing with IRONCLAD, and enjoy a GHOSTBED mattress and other products.
So this is kind of leading me to my next question or point here, which is about emotional granularity. And so as we get into kind of how you regulate emotions, one of the key pieces across a lot of this stuff you talk about as well is the more granular you can get about how you feel, the better you are at then dealing with that feeling. So talk about that a little bit. Like, why is that critical, and how does it help people as they get into actual regulation techniques?
Yeah. So that's you've naturally progressed this through ruler because the L is labeling.
I'm teeing it up for you as best I can.
Yeah, there you go. You're hired.
Yeah,
You're hired. So labeling emotions is having that granularity. And so, we talk about categories of emotion: happy, sad, anger, fear, etc. But, if you only have one word to describe happy, then there's this one conception of it. But if you have contentment or contented, you've got please, you've got joyful, you've got happy, you've got excited, and you've got elated, and you've got ecstatic. Oh, it's a little bit more granular. So for example, I'm going to push you on this one.
Okay.
We'll play a little vocabulary game.
Great.
So what is the, from your perspective, the difference between excitement and elation?
Oh, great question. Let me think about it. Elation to me seems more like on a higher level of some sort. Like excitement is sort of can be a little bit more fleeting and even a little bit more visceral, I guess, for lack of a better term. But elation is almost like an overwhelming type of excitement.
Yeah. So the way we think about it is excitement is generally anticipatory. I'm excited we're going to the park this weekend. I'm excited we're going on a vacation. How are you feeling about going there? I'm excited. You're looking forward to something. Or it could be in the moment, but it's mostly forward looking. Elation, you probably wouldn't say, I'm elated about going away. Right? It sounds a little weird. But if you're won an award and you're thinking about your accomplishments and how joyful you are, oh, I was elated on stage. I felt this combination of joy and pride. Or I was elated, with the birth of my son or my grandson, or, it was a moment of pure elation. But it's kind of the result of something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the temporal distinction there, but yeah, I get your point.
And so some people might be like, oh my God, this guy Mark is like ridiculously boring. Like he's really like pulling, threads here. But, it's good communication skills. It's good to understand the differences. Like, so for example, like what do we do? Like in my program, which is in thousands of schools, I would have like middle school or elementary school kids have conversations around how do you prolong the feeling of elation? That's pretty interesting, right?
Yep.
Because emotion regulation is not just about feeling less stress and less angry and less sad. Emotion regulation is also about like holding on to some of the good stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
we tend to be very dismissive of positive emotions. Like, you know, how was your day at work? Great. Oh, cool. And then you move on. We don't say things like, tell me about your highlight. What was, it's sad really,
Yeah.
because those are moments of deep connection to help people like share their pleasant experiences.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, I hopefully people aren't like kind of rolling their eyes on getting into the specifics of this, because I do think it's important. I mean, again, you talk about the emotional granularity of things, and I certainly sort of in my own work on myself and trying to become more mindful and mentally fit,
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's really important, one, to assess am I dealing with something that's more of a cognitive thing or an emotional thing, right? Is it more of a thinking thing or a feeling thing that I'm kind of working with right now? And then the temporal distinction is the other piece of that. Is this something that is, am I thinking about something from the past that I'm having trouble with, or feeling something about the past? Or is it the other way around? Am I thinking about
Mm-hmm.
something that might happen, or feeling, some kind of trepidation about something? So yeah,
Yeah.
those are critical things to think about for sure. Because otherwise, I don't think you know exactly how to work with them.
Well, I'll give the best example from, here I am, a professor at Yale. Everybody's smart, obviously, it's like by definition, you can't get in without having good test scores. And so you would think my students would be both cognitively intelligent
Mm,
and perhaps emotionally intelligent. So I do these surveys with my students. Everyone says they're stressed. I'm stressed out. I'm stressed. I'm thinking to myself, really? Like, it's a pretty good life here, But
yeah.
anyway, you know, um, and I didn't believe them. And I say this because I'm coming at it from an emotion scientist perspective. Because stressed is having too many demands and not enough resources. And I'm thinking, like, you're taking 4 classes a semester. Give me a break. You know, like, I'll give you stress. That would have been my fault. I'll give you stress. Right.
Yeah.
And so I had them journal about all their emotions. Like, why are they having this feeling? What's going on? And what do you think was the actual emotion they were feeling? They were labeling as stress.
Um, okay. Well, you really tested me today. I don't know if I've ever been sort of
Yeah,
like
I want to make this
challenged
to
this
you.
much. Um,
You're a Navy SEAL. You
yeah,
can handle
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't make you good at everything, believe me. Um, what's the actual emotion they're feeling that's not stress? I don't know. I don't know how else I would frame that.
it. Guess what it was? It was envy.
Oh, interesting. I would not have guessed that.
Neither would anybody else. So you're not alone. And so when they described all the things that were making them stressed, it was everyone else studies for less hours than I do and gets better grades.
Mm,
Everyone else has more connections in Hollywood or Wall Street. Everyone else has this. Everyone else, it was all social
yeah.
comparisons. And so that's envy, not stress.
Mm,
Now, why do I share this with you? Because, of course, I go to the counseling center at my university, and I'm a little snarky. And I go in, I'm like, what's our university's envy reduction program? Because the mindfulness work and the yoga, while helpful for many things, I don't think is going to really reduce envy.
mm.
Downward dog will not solve your envy problems.
Yeah.
You know, I think what you need to do is you need to change the way you think about your life. Like, how about like, dude, you're at Yale University. How about some gratitude? Like, you've done pretty well. You know,
Yeah, for sure. So you're getting into regulation. So before you kind of
yeah.
even get into that, let's kind of
Well, but
go ahead.
so let me just finish. My point is that I go to the counseling center because I'm stressed and anxious and overwhelmed. And they're like, go sit on the cushion, go take deep breaths, go take walks, go do your mindfulness exercises, and I come back to you later. I'm still stressed. And the reason why is that you've identified the wrong emotion.
Right.
You're actually feeling envy. And so when I take walks, what do? I think about everybody else is better than I am. Right? So it's not like I reinforce, like, oh yeah, that's true. I haven't thought about how much richer this person is or how much more connected they are. Unless I'm given a strategy to help me reframe, I'm probably not going to reduce the actual emotion I'm feeling.
Right.
So that's the whole point of granularity and specificity, that if you can name it, you can tame it.
Got it. Okay. Great example. So let's get into regulation specifically. Obviously, this is what your book and your work centers on. And just start with, what does that mean? Because I think a lot of people probably hear
Sure.
emotional regulation and they think suppression, they think avoidance potentially. Again, we haven't really been given tools to know how to do this.
Right.
And then along with that, what is within our control? I think about this a lot. Like, and when it comes to an emotion, where is the line of control? Because there's a lot of things when I break this down where I think about, depending on the situation, there's a piece of that emotional reaction that is not, I don't think, within my control. If someone jumps out and scares me, or I get tragic news, like that, the feeling, so to speak, this sort of energetic reaction, I don't believe is, I don't know if I have any control over it. Maybe I do, but whatever it is, it's very, very minimal. It's then a question of what do I do with how I'm feeling afterwards, the sort of response to that. So talk a little bit about that too, like where that line is specifically.
Sure. Just one little thing before I get there. It's not rule R, it's rule R. And so there's an E in there, which is about expressing emotions. And so we want to be skillful at communicating how we feel, with the right time, at the right intensity, with the right person, whether it's in written form or journaling, because there is a whole expression of emotion piece, and being aware that how we express our feelings is oftentimes contagious. So if we come home all stressed out, we're going to create a stressed out family. And that leads to regulation, which is where we're focusing now. So again, just like you interviewed me, you can interview 16 other scientists who get 16 definitions. It's a problem. Of course, mine is the best one, but whatever. So I have a formula for emotion regulation, which is emotion regulation is a set of goals and strategies. That's first. So I can anticipate an emotion and prevent it. Like if I know, for example, I'm going to be nervous on a podcast with you, I can do a little research about you, and I can kind of give myself strategies in advance so that I can show up feeling less anxious. That's a prevention, or sometimes we call that like an antecedent focus. Let's not, I have an aunt, for example, who lives in New York City. She's really one of those like devil wears Prada types. And she's just not fun. She's very aggressive and, kind of like difficult to be around. I know after, 56. So, 50 years of going to Aunt Blank's house, it's not going to be fun. And so I just go in with a new attitude now. I'm like, nothing she can say is going to activate me. It's all good. It's a movie. I'm watching a movie tonight. And so I plan ahead. Boom. That's a prevention strategy. There's reducing difficult emotions. I have an acronym for this too. I call it PRIME. So prevent, reduce, want to downregulate. Initiate is also creating an emotion. So telling humor in a podcast maybe shifts things a little bit, etc. I want to maintain an emotion. I'm having a good day. I gotta savor that. Or I want to boost or enhance an emotion. So that's the goal. The strategies are all the things that we've been talking about here and there, like breathing, mindfulness, taking a walk, shifting your thinking, getting social support, biological things like sleep and food and activity. Those are the strategies. And so emotion regulation is a set of goals and strategies, but we choose the strategies based on a lot of things. The first is what feeling we're having. So like I said earlier, if I were feeling stressed about my work, Stress is having too many demands and not resources. So what do I do there? I say, Mark, your work never ends. You can do the best you can, and you're going to create your own boundaries and cutoffs, or you're going to delegate. I don't know how else to get rid of stress. It doesn't just go away. I can breathe, but then I'm going to still come back to have 15,000 emails,
Right.
you know? So if it's real stress, where there's demand on the system and the system can't handle it, the system has to decide, I'm good for today. And I create those boundaries for myself because I am stressed a lot. I'm just sort of like, guess what? This is not a 9 to 5 job. It's your choice to decide, like, it is what it is, but let it go. Or I just, yell at my assistant to help me. Just kidding. So point is that the strategy selection for stress versus the envy, totally different, right? The envy is the gratitude. It's kind of self-talk strategies. It's acceptance. Mark, your father was an air conditioning repairman. He wasn't a senator. Get over it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm going to spend my whole life like comparing myself to people that are like, I grew up, in a blue collar family in New Jersey. I didn't grow up in the Hollywood Hills with a father who was a Hollywood producer. It's like I could spend my whole life feeling envious, or I can let it just say like, you've done pretty good for the son of an air conditioning repairman. But do you see how what I'm getting at here? Like,
Yeah.
the strategy choice really varies as a function of the emotion.
Yeah. And I guess my question there would be, how do you decide? Because like the stuff that you talk about in the book, I almost would separate into top down approaches where it's more of a cognitive response to that emotion, or a bottom up approach, which is more, I'm going to work through some kind of physiological thing, a breathing technique, or a visualization. Well, I guess a visualization would be kind of cognitive as well, but something that's more kind of bottom up. And my question is how you figure out, like, is it almost like this list of emotions start with top down and this list of emotions start with bottom up, or is it situational? Does it depend on the person?
That's a good point.
Like, that's kind of.
Well, you've brought in the other part of the formula, which is, so it's a function of the emotion, the person, meaning your strategy selection will vary as a function of your personality. If you're an extrovert, you might choose to hang out with friends to feel less stressed. If you're an introvert, you might go to a wine bar with one friend. Your values, if you value family or if you value autonomy, you might choose different things. And then the context. So right now, as much as I would, I did work out last night, so I feel good. And I was going to be, meeting with the Navy SEAL, gotta pump myself up. I even didn't even cover up my cut on my forehead.
There you go. Good.
Challenge is I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and my bedroom is so dark, I banged my head on the wall.
Oh, wow.
First time I've ever done that, but I'm afraid I'm not sure what is going on there. But anyway, my point is that the context matters. So right now I'm plugged into my computer. I'm sitting here talking to you. If you ask me a question and I was like, oh, like way, like you're challenging me, I can't be like, Chris, apologies, but I'm going to go for a run.
Right.
Tonight I can go for a run, but right now I can't. So that's why we have to have a tool bag of lots of strategies to choose from, because they come and go and they're useful in different contexts. Yeah. And you're right, though. Some are more preventative by nature. So I know that as a husband, I will be way more irritable in the morning if I don't get the sleep that I need. Just my threshold everything's different. Yeah, I'm just like not in the mood. I don't want to talk to you. I'm like, And so I can be more preventative if I take care of my sleep. I know because I have a little bit now, I'm very rigorous about my exercise, that if I don't get my workouts in, it's going to mess with my brain. I feel better after I work out, and I'm a better human
Mhm.
after I work out. I make better choices about food. I make better choices about what I say, and that's all biological. So putting this all together, emotion regulation, goals and strategies that are a function of the emotion, the person, and the context. And that works, by the way, for self-regulation and for co-regulation.
So, and I want to get into co-regulation, but one kind of question about that, because it came up there, is this sort of prevention, proactive versus reactive dealing with
Yeah.
stuff. Because one of the things you say in your sort of 7 reasons people can't deal with their feelings, one is we'd rather treat than prevent. That's you lay that out
Mhm.
at the beginning of this
Yeah.
book. And I definitely agree with you on so many levels. I mean, it's also true with our medical system and just our physical health.
Totally.
Is like, hey, let's treat it when it becomes a problem. And I think for emotions specifically, it's almost like people would even have a hard time conceiving of how you get preventative on that, because it's like, well, how do I deal with something before I'm dealing with it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what is that? What can that?
It's knowing yourself.
What's that?
It's knowing yourself and knowing your relationships. Have you ever worked with someone who's difficult?
Yes, but nobody in my current organization that I work at. Let me make that clear. Nobody's difficult.
There you
Yeah.
go. It's okay.
That's
That was
job
sent,
security right there.
Exactly. But and so like I've worked with people in the past who, they're anxious, right? I can feel the anxiety when I'm in a meeting. Maybe it's because I'm the big boss, or I'm the leader of the lab or something like that. And so I can think ahead of time about 2 things. One is, how do I kind of shift my thinking about that person before I get into the meeting? And 2, what can I do right off the bat to shift how they feel, to make them less
Mhm.
anxious? What a gift that is to a relationship.
Yep.
So that's what I mean by prevention. It's totally feasible. You can't prevent something you don't know. And that's why you have to know yourself. So if I don't get nervous doing public speaking, so it doesn't work for me in that place. But I do have a little bit of social anxiety. I don't love being in big
Yeah, me
parties
neither.
unless it's, if they're celebrating me, it's fine. But
Right. Yeah. Then I'm good.
but
You guys giving me stuff? Cool.
exactly. But if I have to go in there and navigate my way through strangers, I don't,
I don't
because
love it
of
either.
my,
I'm with
yeah.
you.
So, but I can say, Mark, here's your deal. You go in, you scout in 5 minutes. You don't feel connection, you don't have to stay.
Mm-hmm.
That way, who cares? Let it go. So it's like another good example of prevention, something that I struggled with actually, because I get asked to go out to dinner a lot. I'm pretty strict about my feeding, my feeding, like a dog. I'm pretty strict about, my caloric intake and the kind of foods I eat. I noticed for years when I was in social situations, I would eat more food than I wanted to, and I go back to my hotel and I'd be like, ugh. And so now, pretty religiously, I get into an elevator when I'm getting picked up to go out for the dinner. I'm like, Mark, remember how you want to feel when you go back to your hotel room. You don't want to feel bloated and disgusted, eat all that goop. No. So it just puts me in the right place to order the right foods, to notice when I'm getting a little anxious at the dinner, and just be like, you can breathe, you can drink water, you don't have to stuff your mouth.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
For sure. I mean, you're bringing up stuff that I was talking to, Ethan Cross about the other day, or at least was in his book too, about even just some of these techniques where talking to yourself in the third person or in the second person is helpful. That sort of distance that you can get. You're like coaching another person is helpful. But I want to get into, before we run out of time here, I want to get more
Sure.
into the co-regulation stuff, because so much of what you talked about is obviously, when we talk about emotions, is dealing with other people. And the whole
Yeah.
co-regulation thing is, I think, kind of unique to you too, or at least the way you talk about it and the depth you talk about it is something I haven't seen in a lot of places. So talk about that, like what that means and how we can do it properly. Because it's funny, I either finished your book or I was in the middle of it, or I just read this, and I got home from a work trip. I was listening to a lot of it too, so I kind of go back and forth, actually physically reading the book and listening to it. Especially when it's read by the author, because it's kind of nice. You get a little bit of the feel for the energy of the person. But you were sort of talking about this, about listening techniques and like how, what makes you really good at this, and someone like Uncle Marvin in your case. And I came home to a situation of my wife like unloading on me about, not about me, but about something where I was like, okay, I've got to put this into practice right now. I've just gotten this stuff, and I've got to be a good listener. And I think it's something we're so shitty at a lot of times.
Yeah.
So talk about the importance of this and what it looks like in practice and why it's so important.
So co-regulation is intentional. It's not, yelling and screaming or avoiding, right? That's not intentional, right? It could be intentional, but it's the intentional supportive process, right? So I have decided that as a parent of a newborn, it is my responsibility to deactivate the nervous system of my child, to help them have a calm nervous system so they can flourish. So I'm being very intentional about that. So what I'm doing is I'm monitoring facial expressions. I'm validating feelings if it's an older child or a colleague. I'm maybe structuring the environment in a way that's helpful. And what I'm doing is I'm taking all of the strategies, that I read about in the book and applying them to other people. But here's the trick. And this is where I think a lot of people misunderstand this work, is that people sometimes see it as coddling. And that is not what this is about. My job is not to make you codependent as my kid. My job is to help you learn strategies so that when you're out by yourself, you can apply them and succeed in life. And it's just such a critical lens for co-regulation, that it's about the supportive process in the service of you being able to self-regulate in the future.
Yeah. But how do you draw that line? Because that's such when I think about that, again, I think many people, and I'm not excluding myself in this category, aren't great listeners and don't listen very well, and everything's hyper speed these days. And so we're rush, and we're doing something else, and we're looking at someone's talking to us about something that matters to them, and we're looking at our phone, or we're thinking about something else. Yeah. So we have to get better at that skill. But then to the point you're kind of making there too, like, how do you do that in a way that doesn't come off as I'm going to validating somebody's feelings, but then not then I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to teach you how to do this, where it almost, because someone could get closed off from that. They could resist that of like, don't tell me what to do, just listen to what I'm feeling, kind of thing.
Yeah. And by the way, in my research, this is like a huge study, 70 different studies across the world. No one asks for someone to fix them or to solve their problems for them. If you think about the characteristics of the people that we want to be around, the people who we see as the best co-regulators of our emotions, they have 3 to 4 characteristics. They're non-judgmental. So it's not like toughen up, that's judgmental, right? So it's non-judgmental. It's like, Mark, you be you. This is who you are. I'm just going to listen. I'm going to self-regulate and not say things that are going to, make you think that I think otherwise. The second is listening. I'm actually going to listen, not with the intention of retaliating. I have a friend who's like that. She's an amazing listener. She listens to the whole thing, and she figures out a way to get her point across very clearly after she's listened.
Right. Yes.
She's like making
exactly. Yeah.
And my brother is that way. It drives me out of
Yeah.
my freaking mind. He like he's like, tell me what happened. Why would you want to do that? And why would you do that? And like, oh, the university that, like, that's not listening, David. That's like, you're intentionally trying to find a way to sabotage everything that
Right.
ugh. So
Or
that's,
it's like, oh, I'm gonna go fix that for you. That's the other thing people can do, right?
yeah,
Some
yeah.
people want to step in and be like, oh, I got this. Don't worry about it.
Which, by the way, is the worst thing you can do for a kid. Because where's the resilience
Sure.
building?
Yeah.
If every time your kid is crying, you're like, honey, don't cry. Let me help
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And the
I
kid's going
tend
to
to
be
I
37
tend
years
to be the
old,
opposite. I'm
sitting.
like, go figure it out. Like, don't bother me with this stuff. Like,
Yeah.
sort it out. If someone's
So that's
dying
yeah.
or is like needs to go to the hospital, like you let me know. Other than that, figure it out.
Uh-huh. Well, we can, with a little bit of a little more in
I
there,
know.
maybe.
I'm
So,
being
I know,
hyperbolic.
you're just kidding. But it's like, so the example of a good co-regulator is like in a fear response. So your kid, let's say your kid is trying to climb a rock. They're young, like, it's a little dangerous. But they're showing motivation, but then they get to a certain place and they start crying, they're afraid. Some people's response is, let me come get you, honey. Don't, be careful. Others might be, honey, it looks a little dangerous. I actually think you're going to make it, but let me come closer to be there to support you. Let's try to get to the top because I know that's what you really want to do. And I'm just going to be there to just guide you a little bit in case something goes wrong. Do you get it? You see the
For
difference?
sure.
I believe in you. I'm validating. I believe in you and I'm going to be supportive. I'm not going to change my expectations. I'm not going to make you feel bad about yourself. I'm not going to, rescue you. That's good co-regulation. It's important. And there's like, there's fine lines there because some of the opposition, which by the way, we actually have people like actively opposing the work that I do in schools. It comes from this misperception of like, it's like teaching kids about feelings makes them fragile.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Yes. Yep.
And it's like, no, you just don't understand what we're teaching. I'm actually teaching people how to be resilient, not fragile.
Yeah. So to that point, as we kind of come up on time here,
Sure.
like if you were to tell people if there was like one thing, either the thing you see the most often with people or based on your experience, like, hey, implement this technique tomorrow, whether it's dealing with probably a couple things, dealing with yourself, like just your own kind of emotional regulation, the co-regulation piece with probably folks you interact with the most, coworkers, family, friends, and then the parenting thing too, because I think that that's so important. I think this is something that, like, we try our best, but I'm a parent of 3, and it's like you look back on your parenting resume and go, "Oh, probably could have handled that a little bit better." Certainly not knocking it out of the park all the time, but yeah, what's the kind of top thing that those parents should implement too to make emotionally resilient kids?
I think the first goes back to my kind of earlier work, which is permission to feel. That we have to give ourselves and everyone else permission to feel. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. All emotions are data and information. Just like adopt that mindset. Anxiety is not like the end of the world. It's uncertainty about the future. There's lots of things to be anxious about. Like, why would that be bad? So I think that's a critical thing. I think for parents, what I've noticed, and for adults working with other people, is they have to be able to deactivate before they can co-regulate. I noticed, like, in my own mother, my mother was triggered by me as a kid. I hate you. Go to your room. Who do you think you are? She just couldn't respond. When I was being bullied or having really tough time, I would come home and be aggressive and that, they could cry for help. It didn't come out well because I didn't know how to do that either. But she got activated by my behavior. And, had she had more training in my work, she would have been like, shit, this is not good. B, I need to take a deep breath because what's coming at me right now is not pleasant. But my job is to figure out how to help my kid deactivate so that I can meet them where they're at and support them. It sounds simple, but it's actually a lot of work.
Yeah.
It takes practice. I notice that in all my relationships, like the immediate, like when you're triggered is like, go for the jugular. It's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier to just say, go blank yourself, get out of my face, go to your room. It's harder to be present.
Yeah.
And then, as you're working with someone else, ask yourself, am I non-judgmental? Am I listening more than talking? Am I really demonstrating my compassion? And I would say that's where I would begin. Then, of course, all of the different strategies, that I write about are important. You need to know them all. And I say that with humility, but you need to know them all because they're going to come up as useful in different situations. Because a lot of people think that emotion regulation is all about like using this strategy in that moment. But, I think about, I had a meeting a while back. Didn't go well. And I remember in the meeting, I'm like slowly breathing to like calm myself down. Then I'm thinking, Mark, remember, you're the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence. I'm like having this like self-talk in my head, like, Mark, be the role
You're
model,
right.
be the role model.
Yeah.
And then I decided I was really having a tough time. Like, I gotta go. I realized I'm late for something else. I lied to get out of the room so that I had space. Then I called a friend. I'm like, Doug, like this. I'm like, what? I need some help here. And so like, my point is that to deal with one situation, I breathed, I had thoughts, I left the situation, I asked for social support. And I just want people to recognize that that's why you have to learn all the different strategies because they can work together in beautiful ways to support you in having a better life.
Great. Well, I think let's end it there. That's perfect. Perfect place to end. So, and to that point, Dealing with Feeling is the most recent book, Permission to Feel, the prior work there. If people want to learn more outside of that, where should they find you across the interweb?
I think two things. One is my website, which is easy. It's just marcbrackett.com. Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn and mostly LinkedIn and Instagram. I have a podcast that's strictly on emotions. It's called Dealing with Feeling. And I don't know if you saw this, Chris, but I have an app that I built with the co-founder of Pinterest that's free.
Nice.
It's called How We Feel. And it takes a lot of my work and puts it into an app that people can use to track their emotions over time, get insights, and make change.
Thanks for listening to On the X, the official podcast of the Navy SEAL Foundation and an Ironclad original series. Learn more at NavySealFoundation.org or text On the X to 60104. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.